We are here to talk about converting a course to hybrid and online. So it's best if you already have a syllabus for your course available to you, because we're going to be looking at your learning outcomes and everything as we go through this. The most important thing when we talk about any kind of learning is that we're using evidence-based practices. And this is especially true for online learning, because your connections with the students are going to be very different. And so we know that there are a lot of really good evidence-based pedagogies that we want to try and incorporate into this online learning, okay? And we're probably not going to hit all of these, but I hope that we're going to hit a few of them as we go through these 5 sessions. So you want to make sure that you provide a supportive environment. And in session 2, we'll talk about how to make that connection with your students to provide that support to them. You want to make sure that your course is inclusive. And so if you're going to be doing any kind of videos, do those videos have captioning for students that are hearing impaired? Is there some way for the student who doesn't have the use of their eyes to know what's going on in the video, right? You want to think about these things to make sure they're inclusive. Particularly for students who might be deaf, we now have a deaf student on campus. And so if that student's going to start taking some of the online courses that we create, we want to make sure that's available to them. You want to make sure that your course offers frequent feedback to students, right? This is really important to help them guide their learning. The issue with online learning, though, as from the instructor's perspective, is it tends to be a lot more intense than face-to-face learning. So how do you manage giving them enough feedback while also trying to manage your own workload? And so one of the things that we're going to talk about in session 2 is different grading schemes that you can use that will help you manage that workload. All right, there are a lot of other things in here that we're going to hopefully hit upon as we go through these 5 sessions. But again, it's really about good pedagogy, whether it's online or not online. For the 5 sessions, so across these 5 sessions, we have a number of learning outcomes, a number of things that you should be able to do once you leave here. So at the end of the first session, you want to be able to articulate the structure of your course, which includes connecting your course activities to your learning outcomes, identifying what students will do each week, and you're not going to get all through that completely, but at least you'll get started on that. And then also stating how the students will be evaluated. This right here provides a roadmap for the rest of designing the course. Okay, so we're going to spend all of session 1 today working on that. In session 2, you're going to be able to create course activities to help build relationships with the course content, with you as the instructor, and with other students. You have to be really intentional about this in an online environment. If it's a hybrid course, that's not that important. So in a hybrid course, I teach the Psych 121 as a Mod 2 hybrid course, and so I can build those relationships with students in the classroom, and I can have students work together in the classroom for them to build the relationships, so I don't have to put the extra effort into doing that online. If your course is completely online, that's a very different situation. And so we're going to talk about how to do that. And then also how to select grading options that help you balance the workload and the feedback to your students. So that feedback is important, but you don't want to give yourself so much of the workload that you can't make it through the semester. Session 3, you're going to be able to identify, find, and use asynchronous learning tools in your course. And then the following session is going to be looking at synchronous learning. And then the 5th session is completing the curriculum committee form to obtain approval for the hybrid or online course. So we're actually going to work through that and kind of look at the next steps after that. So you're going to have some products that come out of these 5 sessions. So first of all, this is a step-by-step process for designing your online or hybrid course. There's going to be some work that has to happen afterwards. By the end of the 5 sessions, you will have a course outline with enough detail for the curriculum committee. You will have those completed forms, so that you just need to take those around to get the signatures. And you'll have a roadmap of the additional work that you'll need to do. So let's talk about that additional work. And I fear that once I show you this, everybody's going to leave and you're not going to come back. Even after you finish these 5 sessions, if you're teaching a 3 credit hour course, you can expect to spend at least 45 additional hours either finding or creating the materials that's going to go online, okay? So this might be finding videos, it might be creating videos, it might be creating tests online or quizzes online. It takes time to create those quizzes and tests online. I do a lot of that, and it's a real drag, okay? So I just want you to be aware that this isn't going to be, oh, I've got my course together, now I'm all free to go. No, there's actually a lot of work that follows this. But you're going to have a roadmap that'll get you there. All right, do not expect these sessions to be a technology primer, right? Once we know what technologies you want to use, we're going to offer some sessions on how to use those technologies next semester. But there's so much tech out there that if we show you a bunch of things, it just becomes overwhelming and you can't do anything. All right, so we're going to focus on the pedagogy, we're going to focus on the content, and then we're going to look at the technology. In fact, we're not even talking about technology today, right? So this is all about pedagogy. Do not expect these to be all-encompassing. You want to start small. You're going to put together a really basic course, you're going to run it once or twice, and make improvements as you go. All right? And for those of you who've been teaching, as long as I have, I won't say how long that is, you know that when you were designing your own courses, you started pretty basic, right? And as you got better at teaching, your courses evolved. The same thing for online. We are a Quality Matters institution. For those of you who aren't familiar with Quality Matters, it's a tool, it's an organization and a tool to help essentially evaluate online courses. And it has 101 different things that you have to meet in order to get a Quality Matters seal. And even they say, teach your course a couple times before you even think about applying for Quality Matters. Okay, so start small, get some things going, and as you get more comfortable with it, as you figure out what works and what doesn't work for your particular course, you can make those changes. You also want to use this semester and this spring semester to try out some of those online activities. If you've never done an online discussion group, do an online discussion group for one class period. See how that works. What's working in that? How are you going to evaluate the students? Try that in this, try that in the spring semester as well. If you've never used Echo 360 to record your classes, you might want to do that a couple times in the spring so that you can use those recordings in your online class. Okay, so think about things that you can do that you're already maybe doing that can help you build those online skills for you and your students so that it's not so overwhelming when you start to do that as you teach the full course. And please do not expect these sessions to cover discipline-specific needs. So there are schools that do online labs, right? There are nursing schools that do online labs. I don't know how to do that. You need to contact the experts in that field to figure out what it looks like to have an online lab. And there might be other things within your discipline that is so discipline-specific that you need to contact those experts. Okay, this is about building a kind of a more generic course. All right, so this is session 1. Again, you're going to articulate the structure of your course, you're going to connect your course activities to your learning outcomes, you're going to identify what students will do each week, and you're going to state how the students will be evaluated. So we're going to start with those goals, objectives, and outcomes. And we've been using this language for a long time, so let's make sure that we've got some clarification on it. So this is our little generic student, gender neutral, race and ethnicity ambiguous, right? And the student is sitting in your class, and for the longest time in higher education, we have been talking about making sure that you've got goals and objectives for each of your classes. And we've done a great job of getting that stuff into our syllabuses. There are 2 problems with goals and objectives. The first is that anytime you're in a room with a whole bunch of faculty and you're talking about goals and objectives, the conversation turns to what's the difference between a goal and objective, and everybody has an opinion about that. right? And then you lose sight of student learning. The second problem with goals and objectives is that they're inputs, right? They're things that you're doing to the student, not the things that the students are doing. And when they leave your course and they're applying to graduate schools or they're applying to an internship, those people aren't going to care about what you did to the students. They're going to care about what the students can do, right? And so that's why we've made the shift from goals and objectives to outcomes. Because these outcomes are about what the students can do when they leave your course. These outcomes lead to life and career, all right? When they're done with your course, what can they do? And so that's our starting point. What do you want your students to be able to do by the end of your class? So let's take a look at an example. And I have this as a bad example, but it was a really good attempt. Okay, so this is from an actual syllabus from somebody who is teaching, the syllabus was handed down to somebody else, a youth ministry class. Okay, so these are students that are going to go out and want to be youth ministers, right? So very applied. And this is what they say. So the student will demonstrate the ability to lead games that have purpose, Bible study, systematic curriculum, and lesson plan development, schedule creation, and communication strategies, use of technology, and ministry, and writing covenants. Yeah, exactly. And then they broke it down to demonstrating knowledge of different church models, demonstrating knowledge of how to establish clear professional personal boundaries, on and on and on, right? This is really important, right? We know this is really important. With all the sexy scandals that are going on, this is really important. But when they're hiring your student from your class, do they want to know whether the student can demonstrate the knowledge or whether they can actually set clear and appropriate boundaries, right? It's not about demonstrating the knowledge, it's about actually doing the thing that you want the students to do. So let's take a look at these. It's a better example, not perfect, but it's covering the same thing. By the end of this class, students are going to be able to create and lead Bible study games, develop a systematic curriculum calendar and lesson plans, set and communicate clear and professional boundaries, right? Now imagine that student sitting in an interview, and they're asking that student, well, tell us how you're going to go about doing this. And that student can say, well, in my class, I created and I led these Bible study games, right? I did these things, and I can do these things in this position. So it's about what the students can do. As you change the language like this, you're helping the student then develop the language that they can take out when they leave your class to talk about what they can do. This also provides a roadmap to you about what you should be doing in the class, okay? If we had the other one, well, they just have to demonstrate knowledge of these games. You know, that's a very different thing than saying that students are going to create the games, right? It's a very different thing. And so we want to switch to these action verbs to say this is what the students are doing, because that guides how we design a class. All right, so once again, what do you want your students to be able to do by the end of your class? So we're going to start with some learning outcomes. Everybody knows I love my verbs, and we've got some verbs. And we've got some verbs up here. Some of my favorite verbs. Oh, I see a little error there I have to fix. You'll notice that demonstrate is not on here. Right? I'm going to pull that one off because I don't want you to use that one. Now, I want you to look at the learning outcomes for the class that you are going to be changing and see what needs to be changed in your own learning outcomes. So if you want to pull up the handouts that I sent you, you could do that. So you could start typing right in there, or you can use paper handouts and write right on here. But you are going to start writing your learning outcomes. All right, so if you can work on creating your couple learning outcomes, you want to aim for 5 in your class. You can go a little bit less than that if you want. You probably can go a little bit more. If you've got more than 7, it might get a little bit hairy. Typically have students do, right? We have them read, we have them write papers, give oral presentations, work in groups. We're doing this online now, so there are other things that you might want to have them do. You might want to have them watch a video, work on a project, go visit somewhere and reflect. You might want to have them do simulations. And so I'm going to show you an example of what a simulation might be like, or analyze a case study, or design, create, or compose something, depending on what your discipline is. You might want to have them do something in the community, or interview people, or collect and analyze data, okay? So take that next column, next to your student learning outcomes, and identify a couple course activities that your students are going to do in your class to achieve these. All right, so as the example I have up here for the 121, for the first learning outcome where they apply these strategies to evaluate, process, and synthesize information, they're going to get that from the readings, they're going to get that from the online lectures, and they're going to get that from in-class activities. Again, this is a hybrid class, so they do that in-class activities. For identifying the gaps in information, they do research experiences, and that helps them through that. They do readings and in-class activities. It's really important that students are doing multiple things with the information to attain that learning outcome. All right, so if all you're saying is that they're going to read and watch videos, it's probably not enough. You want them to interact with that content in many different ways. Okay, so think of all the different ways they can interact with that content. I'm going to pull this back up again. Right, so these are some different ways. There might be others that you can think of that would be appropriate for your discipline. And think about those things that you can have your students do to achieve those learning outcomes. This is likely going to change as we go through this, but this kind of sets the stage for where we're going to go to next. So for the learning outcomes that you have, identify a couple activities that they're going to do to achieve those outcomes. What we're going to look at now is how you're going to assess their learning. Okay, so look at those things that you're having them do, and how are you going to assess that? So you might assess it through quizzes, tests, or exams, through a lab practical, through some kind of written work or reflection, or journals, through an oral presentation, through a concept map, right? So this is getting kind of beyond the traditional forms of assessment, through some kind of artwork, video, or musical composition, through performance or skills assessment, which I expect Megan's going to be doing, some kind of participation and discussion board, interpretive dance, right? So there are all these different ways that you can assess what they're doing. All right, so once you get this all filled out, you're going to have your student learning outcomes, you're going to have your course activities, and you're going to have your assessment products, right? This table is important for a couple of reasons. First of all, the curriculum committee is going to want to see that you have all of your learning outcomes and what you're doing in the class, right? So this table can go right into the curriculum committee form. Your syllabus needs to include your learning outcomes and what students are doing in the course. This is an issue of transparency for the student, right? It tells the student that this is what you're supposed to be learning, this is how you're going to learn it, and this is how I'm going to determine whether or not you've learned it, right? So dropping this right into your syllabus helps to promote that transparency to your students. And it's one of those things that you can come back to repeatedly throughout the course when students start asking questions, why are we doing this? And you could say, well, we're doing this particular thing because it helps you develop this particular skill. It helps you make progress on this learning outcome. All right? You're making those connections for the student. You're helping them build that metacognition. So even if you haven't finished this today, when we leave here, you want to fill out the whole thing, and that's going to provide the roadmap then for the next part of this. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about how you're structuring this semester. So now you have an idea about what you're trying to get the students to do, and the things that they're going to do that. Now we've got to figure out how that lays out throughout the semester. All right, so we're going to look at kind of the timeline for the semester. First, we want to talk about a definition of the credit hour. So if you're designing a 1 credit hour class, that means you're going to, and this is for fully online, if it's hybrid, it's going to change. You're going to need 15 hours of online time plus 30 hours of out-of-class time. If it's a 3 credit hour class, you're going to have to figure out 45 hours of online instruction plus 90 hours of out-of-class instruction. Now that out-of-class instruction, that's the homework that we typically have our students do, okay? So you probably, if you've taught the class before, already know what that is. You might want to refine it a little bit so that it matches better with the things that they're doing in the online portion, but that should be pretty straightforward. If you happen to be doing a 4-hour class, a 4 credit hour class, you need 60 hours of instruction and 120 hours of out-of-class time. How do we know how long it's going to take a student to do something? Okay, so on the back of your verbs, wherever I put my verbs, on the back of your verbs, you've got these 3 websites.
Oh, okay.
So this workload estimator, as I was developing this and looking at what other people were doing, everybody points to Rice University for the workload estimator. It's pretty easy to use. It gives you an idea about kind of what the average student is going to need. This is particularly important for reading, right? So they've got a really nice way to break out reading, the different types of text that they're reading, average reading speeds, 450 words an hour versus, or whatever it is, versus 750. You can expect your students to be on lower end. And it talks about the density of the text and everything, so you can get a really good idea about how long it actually should take a student to read something. The second one on here is an assignment calculator, and so this helps you figure out how long it's going to take a student to do something like a research paper, okay? Finding sources, reading the sources, doing drafts, things like that. The third assignment calculator is what we have actually on campus for our students. So if they go into Blackmore Library, they can look at the assignment calculator. They can put their assignment into that, and with their email, it helps to break out the assignment, and then it sends them email reminders of this is what you need to do today to work on this assignment, okay? So the first 2 are for you to use to figure out how long it's going to take for students to do these things. The third one is for students to use. And we're looking at the average student, right? We all know that some students are going to get it really quickly, and it's going to take them a lot less time. And we know other students are going to take a whole bunch of time. So we're kind of looking for that average student. All right, so look at our example on the first page here. So we're going to identify what your topics are, which if you've taught the course before, you kind of already know that, right? You might want to shift things around a little bit, but you already know what those topics are. And then we've got the student activities, so all the things that they're going to do in that week. And then we've got how many hours you expected to spend doing that stuff. And then their offline hours as well. So this is the out of class, the homework stuff, okay? So let's take a look at this first week here. I have complete online learning module. So this is something that Dan Parker in CELT is going to be creating for you. He's going to create a module that we can put into your class that teaches your students how to be successful in an online environment. Okay? He expects to have this done by the end of the semester. It'll be freely available to anybody that wants to put it into their class. You might be thinking, well, if students take my class and they take Lee's class and they take Andy's class, aren't they going to be getting this 3 times? Well, yeah, they are, but you know what? That's okay. Because the more they see that, the better they're going to get at it. Okay, so, feel free to use that. The second thing on here is a schedule assignment. And this is something that I use in my classes, and I think in maybe the 199 are starting to use it as well. And so this has a student break down their week and look at when they're going to do all of their classwork, when they're going to sleep, when they're going to eat, when they're going to go to their practices, when they're going to take care of their family members. It takes them through their week so that they can figure out how to fit in all of this other stuff, okay? And again, once I figure out the best way to put this online, I'm going to give it to you so that you can use it with your students. You don't have to, but I find it a really helpful assignment, particularly if a student is getting bogged down at some point in the semester. You can turn back to this and say, well, let's look at this again. Are you following this? Are you doing these things? Are you spending this much time doing this? Okay? And it really gets very molecular in terms of when I grade it, if students don't have lunch in there, I will take a point off. You have to eat lunch every day of the week. All right? Not an option. So it does have the self-care stuff in there.
2 points for breakfast.
So on the handout, it says, notice in that first week, I'm an hour short, right? And so someplace later in the semester, we're going to have to make up that offline hour. Don't know where that's going to be yet, but someplace it's going to have to be there. The other thing that I want to show you is that I've got this implicit bias test, right? So imagine this is for a psychology class, implicit bias. These are our unconscious biases. This is an awesome test. It's through Harvard, a lot of empirical data. You actually are adding to that empirical data as you complete it. But it's a really nice online activity for students to do. And then they can reflect on it and post about it on a discussion board, okay? So not everything online is going to be looking at a video of me or a video of somebody else, right? You can have them do these other things. And so in this case, it's actually doing this particular simulation so that they have an idea about what implicit bias is. It wouldn't actually happen in the second week of the course, it would happen later in the course. But all right, so once again, this isn't just busy work that we're doing here in terms of creating this table, okay? Because this table is going to serve two purposes. Everything always has multiple purposes. Once again, when we get to the curriculum committee forms, this table, you're going to pick it up out of the document and you're going to put it into those curriculum committee forms and get rid of one of the tables that's there. Because it really breaks down the amount of time that they're spending online and the amount of time that they're spending offline or doing homework stuff, okay? And the curriculum committee wants to see that. Now, distinguishing between the online and the homework stuff, that can be a little bit difficult. I get that, right? The curriculum committee wants to see that you've done that as good as you can, all right? I'm here to answer questions. Jens can answer questions. We can put you in touch with the curriculum committee. So the second way that you can do it, you can use this, is you can put your weeks right into your iLearn course to help students know what's expected, okay? Again, this is that transparency. So imagine your iLearn course. You've got your first week in there. It's about succeeding in an overview of the course. They know exactly how much time I expect them to spend online and offline, right? Very transparent for your students. Again, it helps them to be successful because they know how to schedule their time. If for some reason, the students are actually paying attention to this, we would hope they would, and they're realizing that something is taking them a lot longer, then that's one of those situations where you can say, well, come and talk to me. Let's figure out why that's taking you so long, okay? And you can help them through that learning. This form, and I don't have it up there, this form, don't fill out the last column. At the end of our 5 sessions, this last column is going to be your roadmap for what you need to do to get your course online, right? So, we've got complete online learning module. This is what the students are going to do. We estimate it's going to take them an hour and a half. You are eventually, don't do it today, going to write in here, get module, and put it into my course, right? We have in here watch video, right? On that side, you're going to say either create video or find video. You have on here complete online quiz. You're going to have to create the online quiz. Okay, so this last column eventually is going to be your roadmap for putting your course together. But right now, all you're going to do is work on deciding what your topics are, which you should already know if you've taught the course before. Start to think about the different things that students are going to do in those weeks for those topics. And you've got some of that already in the first table we completed. And then start to estimate how long it's going to take them as you build this. So, homework for your next session. You want to complete the weekly schedule. Right? So you're really thinking through deeply what you're going to be doing in that class, week by week for the students. Okay? That's probably the hardest part of this, to think through that week by week, to hit those targets in terms of the number of hours. Once you have that, then you know kind of what your next steps are. So I'm going to ask that you do complete that between now and session 2. It might change. You might refine things as you learn more about things that you can do with your students, but this gives you a starting point. And for places where you still have holes, right? So you're like, I can only get 2 hours of online stuff in this week. What am I going to do, right? We can talk about ways to fill those holes in subsequent sessions. Does that make sense? All right. So if you want to work on this now, you can do that. I'm here to answer questions, at least get started on it so that you have some idea, kind of give yourself an example of where to move next. This is all the content I have for today. So I'm here to answer questions or to help you think through those things. But please remember to do your homework before session 2.